Hellenistic Judaism was a form of Judaism in the ancient world that combined Jewish religious tradition with elements of Greek culture. Until the fall of the Roman Empire and the Muslim conquests of the Eastern Mediterranean, the main centers of Hellenistic Judaism were Alexandria and Antioch, the two main Greek urban settlements of the Middle East and North Africa area, both founded at the end of the 4th century BCE in the wake of the conquests of Alexander the Great. Hellenistic Judaism also existed in Jerusalem during the Second Temple period, where there was conflict between Hellenizers and traditionalists. The major literary product of the contact of Second Temple Judaism and Hellenistic culture is the Septuagint translation of the Hebrew Bible from Biblical Hebrew and Biblical Aramaic to Koiné Greek, specifically Jewish Koiné Greek. The decline of Hellenistic Judaism started in the 2nd century CE, and its causes are still not fully understood. It may be that it was eventually marginalized by, partially absorbed into, or became progressively the Koiné-speaking core of early Christianity centered on Antioch and its traditions. Hellenism. The conquests of Alexander the Great in the late 4th century BCE spread Greek culture and colonization, a process of cultural change called Hellenization, over non-Greek lands, including the Levant. This gave rise to the Hellenistic Age, which sought to create a common universal culture in the Alexandrian Empire based on that of 5th and 4th century BCE Athens, along with a fusion of Near Eastern cultures. The period is characterized by a new wave of Greek colonization which established Greek cities and kingdoms in Asia and Africa, the most famous being Alexandria in Egypt. New cities were established composed of colonists who came from different parts of the Greek world, and not from a specific metropolis as before. These Jews living in countries west of the Levant formed the Hellenistic diaspora. The Egyptian diaspora is the most well-known of these. It witnessed close ties, indeed the firm economic integration, of Judea with the Ptolemaic kingdom ruled from Alexandria, and the friendly relations which existed between the royal court and the leaders of the Jewish community. This was a diaspora of choice, not of imposition. Information is less robust regarding diasporas in other territories. It suggests that the situation was by and large the same as it was in Egypt. Jewish life in both Judea and the diaspora was influenced by the culture and language of Hellenism. The Greeks viewed Jewish culture favorably, while vice versa. Hellenism gained adherents among the Jews, while Hellenism has sometimes been presented as a threat of assimilation diametrically opposed to Jewish tradition. Adaptation to Hellenic culture did not require compromise of Jewish precepts or conscience. When a Greek gymnasium was introduced into Jerusalem, it was installed by a Jewish high priest, and other priests soon engaged in wrestling matches in the palaestra. They plainly did not reckon such activities as undermining the priestly duties. The main religious issue dividing Hellenized Jews from traditional Jews was the application of biblical laws in a Hellenistic empire. Hellenistic rulers of Judea, under the suzerainty of the Ptolemies and later the Seleucids, Judea witnessed a period of peace and protection of its institutions. For their aid against his Ptolemaic enemies, Antiochus III promised his Jewish subjects a reduction in taxes and funds to repair the city of Jerusalem and the temple. Relations deteriorated under Antiochus's successor Seleucid IV, and then, for reasons not fully understood, his successor Antiochus IV Epiphanes drastically overturned the previous policy of respect and protection. banning key Jewish religious rites and traditions in Judea and sparking a traditionalist revolt against Greek rule. Out of this revolt was formed an independent Jewish kingdom known as the Hasmonean Dynasty, which lasted from 165 BCE to 63 BCE. The Hasmonean Dynasty eventually disintegrated in a civil war, which coincided with civil wars in Rome. Hasmonean Civil War. The Hasmonean Civil War began when the high priest Koiné II was overthrown by his younger brother Aristobulus II. A third faction, consisting primarily of Idumeans from Moresia, led by Antipater and his son Herod, reinstalled Koiné, who, according to Josephus, was merely Antipater's puppet. In 47 BCE, Antigonus, a nephew of Koiné II and son of Aristobulus II, asked Julius Caesar for permission to overthrow Antipater. Caesar ignored him, and in 42 BCE Antigonus, with the aid of the Parthians, defeated Herod. Antigonus ruled for only 3 years, until Herod, with the aid of Rome, overthrew him and had him executed. Antigonus was the last Hasmonean ruler. Influence. The major literary product of the contact of Judaism and Hellenistic culture is the Septuagint, as well as the so-called Apocrypha and pseudepigraphic apocalyptic literature dating to the period. Important sources are Filo of Alexandria and Flavius Josephus. Some scholars consider Paul of Tarsus to be a Hellenist as well, even though he himself claimed to be a Pharisee. Filo of Alexandria was an important apologist of Judaism, presenting it as a tradition of venerable antiquity that, far from being a barbarian cult of an oriental nomadic tribe, with its doctrine of monotheism, had anticipated tenets of Hellenistic philosophy. Philo could draw on Jewish tradition to use customs which Greeks thought as primitive or exotic as the basis for metaphors, such as circumcision of the heart in the pursuit of virtue. Consequently, Hellenistic Judaism emphasized monotheistic doctrine and represented reason and wisdom as emanations from God. Beyond Tarsus, Alexandria to Antioch and northwestern Syria, the second half of the Second Temple period witnessed an acceleration of Hellenization in Israel itself, with Jewish high priests and aristocrats alike adopting Greek names. Oni became Menelaus's, Joshua became Jason or Jesus. The Hellenic influence pervaded everything, and even in the very strongholds of Judaism it modified the organization of the state, the laws, and public affairs, art, science, and industry, affecting even the ordinary things of life and the common associations of the people. The inscription forbidding strangers to advance beyond a certain point in the temple was in Greek, and was probably made necessary by the presence of numerous Jews from Greek-speaking countries at the time of the festivals. The coffers in the temple which contained the shekel contributions were marked with Greek letters. It is therefore no wonder that there were synagogues of the Levantines, Cyrenians, Alexandrians, Cilicians, and Asiatics in the Holy City itself. There is neither Jew nor Greek. Ethnic, cultural and social tensions within the Hellenistic Jewish world were partly overcome by the emergence of a new, typically Antiochian, Middle Eastern Greek doctrine, either by established, autochthonous Hellenized Cilician Western Syrian Jews, heathen, classical Greeks, Macedonian Greeks and Greco-Syrian Gentiles, or the local, autochthonous descendants of Greek or Greco-Syrian converts to mainstream Judaism, known as proselytes, and Greek-speaking Jews born of mixed marriages. Their efforts were probably facilitated by the arrival of a fourth wave of Greek-speaking newcomers to Cilicia, southern Turkey and northwestern Syria, Cypriot Jews and Cyrenian Jewish migrants of non-Egyptian North African Jewish origin, as well as Gentile Roman settlers from Italy, many of whom already spoke fluent Koiné Greek and/or sent their children to Greek schools. Some scholars believe that, at the time, these Cypriot and Cyrenian North African Jewish migrants were generally less affluent than the autochthonous Cilician Syrian Jews and practiced a more liberal form of Judaism, more propitious for the formation of a new canon. Cyrenian Jews were of sufficient importance in those days to have their name associated with a synagogue at Jerusalem, and when the persecution arose about Stephen, some of these Jews of Cyrene who had been converted at Jerusalem were scattered abroad and came with others to Antioch and preached the word unto the Jews only, and one of them, Lucius, became a prophet in the early church there. But Paul, himself a relatively liberal Hellenist convert to Christianity, was later threatened by more religiously conservative Jewish Hellenists as seen in the New Testament Acts chapter 9 verse 29, and he spoke boldly in the name of the Lord Jesus and disputed against the Hellenists, but they attempted to kill him. These subtle, progressive socio-cultural shifts and tensions are somehow summarized succinctly in chapter 3 of the Epistle of Paul to the Galatians. There is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither bond nor free, there is neither male nor female. Decline of the Hellenist and partial conversion to Christianity. The reasons for the decline of Hellenistic Judaism are obscure. It may be that it was marginalized by, absorbed into, or became early Christianity. The epistles of Paul and the Acts of the Apostles report that, after his initial focus on the conversion of Hellenized Jews across Anatolia, Macedonia, Thrace, and northern Syria without criticizing the laws and traditions, Paul of Tarsus eventually preferred to evangelize communities of Greek and Macedonian proselytes and God-fearers, or Greek circles sympathetic to Judaism. The apostolic decree allowing converts to forego circumcision made Christianity a more attractive option for interested pagans than rabbinic Judaism, which required ritual circumcision for converts. See also circumcision controversy in early Christianity and the abrogation of Old Covenant laws. The attractiveness of Christianity may, however, have suffered a setback with its being explicitly outlawed in the 80s CE by Domitian as a Jewish superstition, while Judaism retained its privileges as long as members paid the Ficus Judaicus. The opening verse of Acts chapter 6 points to the problematic cultural divisions between Hellenized Jews and Aramaic-speaking Israelites in Jerusalem, a disunion that reverberated within the emerging Christian community itself. It speaks of Hellenists and Hebrews. The existence of these two distinct groups characterizes the earliest Christian community in Jerusalem. The Hebrews were Jewish Christians who spoke almost exclusively Aramaic, and the Hellenists were also Jewish Christians whose mother tongue was Greek. They were Greek-speaking Jews of the diaspora who returned to settle in Jerusalem. To identify them, Luke uses the term Hellenistai, when he had in mind Greeks, Gentiles, non-Jews who spoke Greek and lived according to the Greek fashion. Then he used the word Hellenes, as the very context of Acts chapter 6 makes clear. The Hellenistai are not Hellenes. Some historians believe that a sizable proportion of the Hellenized Jewish communities of southern Turkey and Syria, Lebanon converted progressively to the Greco-Roman branch of Christianity that eventually constituted the Melkite Hellenistic churches of the MENA area. As Jewish Christianity originated at Jerusalem, so Gentile Christianity started at Antioch, then the leading center of the Hellenistic East, with Peter and Paul as its apostles. From Antioch it spread to the various cities and provinces of Syria, among the Hellenistic Syrians as well as among among the Hellenistic Jews who, as a result of the great rebellions against the Romans in AD 70 and 130, were driven out from Jerusalem and Palestine into Syria. Cultural legacy. Widespread influence beyond Second Temple Judaism. Both early Christianity and early Rabbinical Judaism were far less orthodox and less theologically homogeneous than they are today, and both were significantly influenced by Hellenistic religion and borrowed allegories and concepts from classical Hellenistic philosophy and the works of Greek-speaking Jewish authors of the end of the Second Temple period before the two schools of thought eventually affirmed the respective norms and doctrines, notably by diverging increasingly on key issues such as the status of purity laws, the validity of Judeo-Christian messianic beliefs, and, more importantly, the use of Koiné Greek and Latin as liturgical languages replacing Biblical Hebrew, etc. First synagogues in Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. The word synagogue itself comes from Jewish Koiné Greek, a language spoken by Hellenized Jews across southeastern Europe, North Africa and the Middle East after the 3rd century BCE. Many synagogues were built by the Hellenisti or adherents of Hellenistic Judaism in the Greek Isles, Cilicia, northwestern and eastern Syria and northern Israel as early as the 1st century BCE, notably in Delos, Antioch, Alexandria, Galilee and Judea Europos, because of the mosaics and frescoes representing heroic figures and biblical characters. Many of these early synagogues were at first mistaken for heathen Greek temples or Antiochian Greek Orthodox churches. Influence on Levantine Byzantine traditions. The unique combination of ethno-cultural traits inhered from the fusion of a Greek-Macedonian cultural base, Hellenistic Judaism and Roman civilization gave birth to the distinctly Antiochian Middle Eastern Roman Christian traditions of Cilicia and Syria, Lebanon. The mixture of Roman, Greek, and Jewish elements admirably adapted Antioch for the great part it played in the early history of Christianity. The city was the cradle of the church. Some typically Grecian, ancient synagogal priestly rites and hymns have survived partially to the present, notably in the distinct church services of the followers of the Melkite Greek Catholic Church and its sister church, the Greek Orthodox Church of Antioch in the Hatay province of southern Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, northern Israel, and in the Greek Levantine Christian diasporas of Brazil, Mexico, the United States and Canada. Members of these communities still call themselves Rum, literally Roman, and referring to Asian Greeks in Turkish, Persian, and Levantine Arabic. In that context, the term Rum is preferred over Yavani or Ionani, literally Ionian, and referring to European Greeks in ancient Hebrew, Sanskrit, and Classical Arabic. Notable Hellenized Jews. Hellenistic and Hasmonean period. Andronicus ben Meshullam, Egyptian Jewish scholar of the 2nd century BCE, one of the first known advocates of early Pharisaic orthodoxy against the Samaritans. Antigonus of Soko, also known as Antigonos of Socho, was the first scholar of whom Pharisee tradition has preserved not only the name but also an important theological doctrine. He flourished about the first half of the 3rd century BCE. According to the Mishnah, he was the disciple and successor of Simon the Just. Antigonus is also the first noted Jew to have a Greek name, a fact commonly discussed by scholars regarding the extent of Hellenic influence on Judaism following the conquest of Judea by Alexander the Great. Antigonus II Mattathias was the last Hasmonean king of Judea. Antigonus was executed in 37 BCE, after a reign of 3 years during which he led the national struggle of the Jews for independence from the Romans. Alexander of Judea or Alexander Maccabeus, was the eldest son of Aristobulus II, king of Judea. Jason of the Oniad family, high priest in the temple in Jerusalem from 175 to 172 BCE. Menelaus, high priest in Jerusalem from 171 BC to about 161 BC. Mariam I, Jewish princess of the Hasmonean Dynasty, was the second wife of Herod the Great. Onias Ephraim was the son of Jaddua mentioned in Nehemiah. According to Josephus, this Jaddua is said to have been a contemporary of Alexander the Great. Maccabees regards Onias as a contemporary of the Spartan king Arius I. Onias I is thought to be the father or grandfather of Simon the Just. Ben Zerah, also known as Yeshua son of Sirach, leading 2nd century BCE Jewish scholar and theologian who lived in Jerusalem and Alexandria, author of the Wisdom of Sirach, or Book of Ecclesiasticus. Simeon the Just or Simeon the Righteous was a Jewish high priest during the time of the Second Temple. Simon Thassi was the second son of King Mattathias and the first prince of the Jewish Hasmonean Dynasty. He was also a general in the Greco-Syrian Seleucid army of Antiochus VI, Herodian and Roman period. Andrew the Apostle, Galilean Hyranian Jew, called in the Greek Orthodox tradition Protokletos, or the first called, believed to have preached in southeastern Europe as well as possibly in southern Russia. Patron saint of Ukraine and Scotland. Titus Flavius Josephus was the first Jewish historian, initially a Jewish military leader during the First Jewish-Roman War. He famously switched sides and became a Roman citizen and acclaimed Romano-Jewish academic. He popularized the idea that Judaism was similar in many ways to Greek philosophy. Justus of Tiberius, Jewish historian born in Tiberius, a highly Hellenistic Galilean city. He was a secretary to Governor Herod Agrippa II and rival of Titus Flavius Josephus. Julianus and Pappos, born circa 80 AD in the city of Lod, one of the main centers of Hellenistic culture in central Israel. Julianus and Pappos led the Jewish resistance movement against the Roman army in Israel during the Kitos War 115-117 AD. Filo of Alexandria, also called Philo Judaeus of Alexandria in the Roman province of Egypt, first Jewish philosopher. Saul of Tarsus, a Shaul Tarsi known as Paul the Apostle. Simon of Cyrene, Libyan Jew born at the end of the 1st BC, lived in Jerusalem around 30 AD. Believed to have been forced to bear the cross of Jesus after the crucifixion. His hometown, Cyrene, in northeastern Libya, was a Greek colony, with a large Jewish community where 100,000 Judean Jews had been deported and forced to settle during the reign of Ptolemy Soter, the Greco-Macedonian ruler of Egypt, following his invasion of Israel. Rabbi Tarfon, a Cohen, was a member of the third generation of the Mishnah sages, who lived in the period between the destruction of the Second Temple and the fall of Beta, thought to be originally from the region of Lod, one of the main centers of Hellenistic culture in central Israel. Tarfon was one of the most vociferous Jewish critics of early Christianity. St. Timothy, born in Lycaonia, of Greek father and Hellenized Jewish mother, seconded Paul in his missions to Asia Minor and southeastern Europe. Trypho the Jew, thought to be a 2nd century CE rabbi opposed to Christian apologist Justin Martyr, whose dialogue with Trypho is paradoxically equally influenced by Greek and rabbinic thought. Late Antiquity and early medieval era Rav Papa was a Jewish Talmudist who lived in Babylonia, at a time when Judeo-Aramaic culture was regaining the upper hand against classical Hellenistic Judaism, notably amongst Jewish communities in Babylonia which reverted progressively to the pre-Hellenistic Aramaic culture. Kalonymus family, first known rabbinical dynasty of northern Italy and Central Europe. Notable members include Ithiel, author of Jewish prayer books, and Kalonymus ben Meshulam, born in France circa 1000, spiritual leader of the Jewish community of Mainz in western Germany.